Welcome back, my kings and queens. My name is NPix and I have modeled this Ford Ranger Raptor for the Ford event on our Discord server. As we have a lot of chapters to cover today and we also want to take a look on the submissions from the community that are actually insane, let's start right with chapter 1. The hood. So with Shift and A, I have added in a new cube to the scene and have merged it with M at the center to be only left with one single vertex. Then with G, I grabbed the vertex from the side view and have placed it to the beginning of the hood, moved my view to the top view and have extruded the vertex with E to the right side to the end of the hood. With the loop cut tool, by pressing Ctrl R, I have added in even more vertices to this edge right here and have aligned these vertices onto the blueprint line. And to make the space in between the vertices even, I have also used the loop tools function. As I'm only going to model one part of the car, I have also added in a mirror modifier. Then I took all of the vertices that have existed in the scene and pressed E and Y to create the first faces. I took this edge right here and have slided it to the left side to match up with the blueprint line at the bottom and have done the same to the edge at the right. Then I took this edge right here and have extruded it down to the part where the hood starts to bend. From the top view I have added in two new loop cuts and have aligned the loop cuts from the side view onto the blueprint line. Then I took the last edge and have extruded it all the way to the end of the hood, and to create the banding I have added in a new loop cut and have aligned it onto the blueprint line. Then I took this edge right here and have extruded it all the way to the left side and have added in one more loop cut to match up with the blueprint line even better. Then I extruded all of these vertices a little bit to the left side and have moved them down. Did the same with this edge right here and have connected the vertices, and after this I could go ahead and fill in all of the faces inside of the hood. And as getting rejected by a crush isn't as bad as having Blender crashing and realizing that you have not saved up the file before, I quickly saved my soul by pressing Ctrl and S. And by the way, if you're at this point interested in a complete step-by-step course on how to create a low poly or a high poly car in Blender, you can go ahead and check out my first link inside of my description. I continued on the right side by extruding this vertex to the place where I also have a matching vertex from the left side, and then of course have also matched up the vertices from the other views. I took some vertices from the left side and have extruded them just a little bit to the right and have moved them down, and after adding in some extra topology at the top I could go ahead and move this edge to the bottom. Then I had to add in a loop cut tool right here to match up with the blueprint line and to connect the new placed vertices from the right side. With this I could fill in some faces with quartz, and after adding in some edges and some loop cuts could fill in all of the faces with quartz only. For the inner part I first created some matching vertices, filled up the top with good quartz, and then continued at the bottom by creating a triangle and one ugly as quad. But other than that, the hood was looking really good and I decided to share the progress inside of my Discord server. And if you want to join a really wholesome community all about Blender and especially car modeling, you're invited to do this right now with the code at the screen or the link inside of the description. With that, the hood was already finished and I could go ahead and continue with chapter 2, the front fender. First of all, I extruded some vertices to the right side and then I continued by creating the way up to the A-pillar. At this point I think I wanted to go ahead and completely fuck off the topology. I mean, look at this. What the hell is this even supposed to be? But judging by the recording, I just continued by extruding all of these vertices down, and then I also started to work on the outline of the headlights, where I actually also created a triangle, and I also continued creating triangles on other parts of the front fender. And because one triangle wasn't enough, I have even created a loop cut to create even more triangles, but on areas like this you can't do anything about it, and as I'm going to create a low poly car I don't have to bother about it anyways. From this point right here I have extruded some vertices to create the front wheel arch, and then started to figure out on how I can fill in this area with quartz only. And as I thought that this area right here got a little bit too dense, I merged some vertices together to remove an edge and therefore ended up using one more triangle. I created the rest of the front wheel arch, and although the front fender is not finished at this point right here, I continued with chapter 3, the front bumper. As I am in the first place creating the body parts with the car paint, there was not that much to do for the front bumper, so I actually just traced down the first blueprint lines, then extruded some vertices down and actually was already finished. I then got back to the front fender and first filled in these faces right here, although I can see that there's an air intake or something like this, but you definitely should not go into that much detail at the beginning of the car. And after finishing off the block out of the front end of the car, I continued with chapter 4, the front doors. I first extruded the bottom vertices all the way to the right side where the front door ends, and then basically did the same with the vertices from the top. To fill in the bottom area with quartz only, I have added in one more loop cut and then have cut out this blueprint line right here with the knife tool. And by moving this vertices right here into the inside of the car, I not only recreated the banding but the complete front door. Before I started to create the back door, I first traced down some blueprint lines on the A-pillar, as the vertices that I create right here are basically still part of the front door. And after creating a little bit more thickness to the A-pillar, I started with chapter 5, the back doors. For the back doors, I started at the top by extruding this vertex all the way to the end, but for some reason after this I also started again at the bottom and then moved my way back up again. While creating the back door, I also created the last part of the car body, and creating the back door is actually nothing special, so I just went ahead and filled in all of the areas with as many quartz as possible. I connected the front door to the back door at the top, and after finishing off the top area for the back door, I continued with chapter 6, the back fender. I started by taking this vertex right here and extruding it all the way to the end, and I've added in some loop cuts to make it not look too flat. As I have never modeled a pickup before, I first went ahead and did not connect the end to the front, and instead I basically made two separate objects. While matching up the back wheel arch, the front vertices disturbed my view in the blueprint, so I went ahead and hid off the front vertices. I struggled a lot to create the banding above the taillights, and I've actually used way too much geometry for a low poly car, but at least I have made a better job at the bottom of the taillights. And after creating the last faces for the back fender, I started to work on chapter 7, the trunk. I first traced down this blueprint line right here with some vertices, and I've created one more line of vertices at the top, and after adding in one more loop cut I could go ahead and fill in this area with quartz only. I've also used quartz only on the area at the bottom, and then could go ahead and start with chapter 8, the roof. Between the A, B and C pillar and the roof is a black line, so first duplicated off the outline vertices and have separated them into a new collection. Then by extruding the vertices to the left side, I have quickly recreated the black line. Then I duplicated and separated the outline vertices one more time for the roof. First I extruded off the vertices to the middle, then I've added in a loop cut and have scaled and moved off the vertices onto the blueprint line. To create this part of the roof, from what I have no idea on how to call it, I have first added in some more loop cuts to match up with the blueprint line, and then extruded all of these faces manually and slided some of the edges to make it look right. After doing this 2 more times, the roof was already finished, and with that the complete car body itself was finished, and I could continue with chapter 9, the front black plastics part. For this I first duplicated and then separated all of the outline vertices from the front wheel arch. Then I added in the first layer of thickness by extruding it to the right. For the next layer I first added in a new edge, and I've added in as many vertices as I have at the outer wheel arch line. And for the last layer of the front wheel arch I have used the same method. And to keep the faces flat I have scaled the vertices to the same X value. Right here I had to add in a little bit of detail, so I first deleted the edge to get some space, and after finishing it and zooming out you could not even see it, so it was definitely not worth it. I then continued on the front bumper black plastics part by duplicating the vertices from the front wheel arch, traced down some blueprint lines and filled in some faces. Then I went on modeling this light part right here, and I first created the frame, and to add in the thickness I have inserted the faces. I then went ahead and used the loop tools to create a circle out of the topology that I had, but as this was not working out really good, I went ahead and have done it the old school way by first sliding the vertices to a circular shape, and after this I could apply the loop tools without having any issues. I then filled in the gap that I had in the front bumper by extruding off the outline vertices into the inside of the car and then filling in the faces. And at this point right here I already had more than one object which should be in different colors, so I started with chapter 10, the materials. By pressing Z I went into the material preview mode, and I first added in a new material with a red color for the paint, and I changed the settings to make it look more natural. After this I of course also added in a black plastics material and have added it in to the right objects. I then continued by creating the chrome bar at the front of the car, and after finishing off the modeling part I have also added in a chrome material to it, and after creating even more details for the front bumper I have started with chapter 11, the front grille. I have started by adding in a new circle with 6 vertices to the scene, then I scaled down the circle to the size of one segment of the grille. I've duplicated this one segment by hand to match up exactly with the first segment, and normally I would go ahead and use the array modifier to go ahead and create a complete grille, but as the grille part right here is just very small, I've went ahead and created it by hand. I then quickly deleted all of the unnecessary segments, and in this case I have also not used a lattice modifier but just went ahead and rotated the grille into the right spot. Then I added in some thickness to the grill by extruding it to the back, deleted even more unnecessary segment parts and vertices, made sure to also delete the vertices from the back to save up some triangles, and after applying the materials the front grill was done, and I continued with chapter 12, the back black plastics part. I started by creating the back wheel arch, and it was basically the same process as the front one, and the parts for the back bumper were nothing special compared to the front bumper. So after finishing off the last part, which was the license plate area, I continued with chapter 13, the glass parts. Once again, I first duplicated off the outline vertices and I've separated them into a new selection. Then I created the first frame by filling in the face and then setting it. To create the thickness, I've extruded it into the inside of the car. Then I added in some loop cuts to create the B-pillar, and of course created the B-pillar afterwards. For the glass part itself, I again duplicated the outline vertices, filled in the faces with as many quads as possible, and I've added in a loop cut into the middle to not make it look too flat. I then added in a new material for the glass parts, and instead of finishing off the other glass parts, I continued with chapter 14, the second front grille. Before I could go ahead and model the front grille itself, I first needed to go ahead and add in a basic frame, and to create the room behind the frame, I basically extruded the outline vertices to the back, filled in the face with F, triangulated off the faces with Ctrl and T, and then enabled triangles to quads with Alt and J. So after repeating the same process with the circle like on the other grille that we already made, this time I've actually added in a lattice, and I first aligned it to the grille, and after adding in the lattice modifier I could easily go ahead and align the grille to the front of the car. And after deleting off the unnecessary vertices to ensure that the grille looks perfect, I've also added in the right material, and with that have finished off the grille and started with chapter 15, the headlights. I did the inside of the headlight the same way like I did the back of the front grille, and then started to create the daytime running light by inserting a face. With a new cube added to the scene, I then started to model out the main light bulb, and to know on if I modeled it correctly, I first created the transparent part to know on how far out the light bulb can be. To make the main light bulb look not too blocky, I have beveled the corner edges, and after separating the light bulb into different objects, I duplicated the same model down to create a second one, and then went ahead on applying of the materials. To make the headlights glow, I have also added in a bloom geometry node, and with that the headlights were looking really good, and I could continue with chapter 16, the taillights. There's actually not that much left to say for the taillights, as the process is the exact same like on the headlights. So after creating the inner area, I've traced down the imaginary blueprint line for the low beam taillight, have made it glow like the headlights, and have added in the other materials to make it look really good. After creating the other parts of the taillights, I filled in the gap behind the lights, and then continued to chapter 17, the rest of the glass parts. And no, the chapter names won't get any better. I've extruded the top vertices down and have scaled them up to match up with the blueprint line, and then used the knife tool to create the black frame. I have then selected the outline faces and have separated them into a new object so that I could go ahead and add in the new material for the black outline. I then quickly filled in the gap between the windshield and the hood, and after this I've also filled in the faces at the back for the back windshield. Once again used the knife tool to create the black frame, and with that finished with all of the glass parts and moved on to chapter 18, the details. The first thing that I did was to fill in the gap between the front and the back end of the car. Then I created the handle to open up the trunk. For right there I've also cut out the place for the third brake light, which I also quickly went ahead and modeled, and I even went into the detail of creating this thing for the key. Then I duplicated a face from the hood to create this air intake or whatever it is, and then also created the air intake on the front fender. And after finishing this, I started with chapter 19, the pickup area. I first created a face with the outline vertices and have inserted it in just a little bit. I deleted the face after the insert and again selected off the outline vertices and have extruded them down. After I filled in the face, I realized that I first need to go ahead and create the wheel arch. So I duplicated some vertices from the black plastics part wheel arch from the back, implemented the vertices into the geometry that I already had, and then also extruded the vertices to make the wheel arch a little bit wider. And I didn't go too crazy about the detail inside of the pickup area, so I just went ahead and filled in off the faces. After applying off the materials, the pickup area was finished, and I have continued with chapter 20, the side mirrors. For the side mirrors, I always start by duplicating a single vertex from the car body and then tracing down the blueprint line from the top view. Then I can create the first faces by extruding some vertices to the top, and to make it look not too blocky, I have added in a bevel. As this was already it for the part with the car paint on it, I then duplicated the outline vertices to start off the black parts, and this was basically just extruding the vertices down and then to the left. Then I created the black frame by extruding these vertices on the y-axis and then insetting the face, and after extruding the last face into the inside and separating off the objects and applying the materials, the side mirror was already finished and I could continue with chapter 21, the underbody. I think at this point you already know what you have to do. Of course, we first of all need to go ahead and duplicate off the outline vertices. Then I continue by extruding the wheel arches into the inside of the car and scaling them down to the same value on the x-axis. And after this, it's basically just extruding off the vertices into the middle and then filling in the gaps at the front and at the back. And for this object right here, I do not fucking care about the topology, as no one will ever be able to see the underbody. So after spamming F to fill in off the faces, I applied the material and was done with the underbody and continued with chapter 22, the normals. I opened up the overlays menu and enabled face orientation and got shocked extremely, but I guess this is just how it's supposed to look like if you have never checked the normals during the modeling process. But actually it was quite easy to fix off the normals, as I could just go ahead and spam shift and N to recalculate them. After a couple of minutes I could not see any red faces anymore, so I could continue with chapter 23, the rims. So first of all, I went ahead and added in a circle and have placed it to the correct place on the blueprint line, and then have set the 3D cursor into the middle of the circle. I then also placed a reference image for the rims that I got, deleted off the vertices from the circle that I don't need, as I'm only going to model one segment, made some quick maths to make sure that the calculator in my head works correctly, and then went ahead and traced down the blueprint lines for the rim by playing around with the pivot point, set to 3D cursor and medium point. To create the overall shape of the rim, I have added in a new circle and have modeled it on how the rim is supposed to look like. Then I could project the faces of the rim onto the faces of the circle, and voila, the shape was ready. I then added in some thickness to the rims, added in a new circle to create the holes for the screws, and with this one segment ready, I could go ahead and duplicate it and rotate it all along the 3D cursor to get the complete rim. The only thing left to do was this part in the middle right here, but after this the rim was finished and I could go ahead and continue with chapter 24, the tire. As the Ford Ranger Raptor is an off-road vehicle, I definitely needed to go ahead and create a tire with some tire threads. So I first went ahead and created the overall shape for the tire, and just like on the rim, I was only about to model one segment of the tire. I actually never have really modeled tire threads before, so I just went ahead and extruded some vertices to recreate the shape. I then projected the vertices onto the tire and then just went ahead and extruded them up on the z-axis. Then I rotated the complete segment to get the whole tire, fixed up some issues along with it, then also created the other half of the tire by scaling it by -1 on the x-axis, and as a car does not only have one wheel but four, I duplicated the wheel first to the back and then duplicated both of the wheels to the other side. For the last time I have applied off the materials and then have moved on to chapter 25, the final render. Although this is an off-road vehicle, I didn't have the time to create a off-road scenery, so I just went ahead and imported the car into my basic render scene setup. And as a conclusion I can say that I had a lot of fun modeling this pickup, as I have never modeled a pickup before, but my community has made way better thoughts for the Ford event, as I have completely f***ed up the voting. So let's take a look on chapter 26. The community submissions. On place 7 we have the submission from Superstar, who has made an older Mustang model. The car model looks clean and nice, and the scenery is also way better than what I have used. So all in one, a great submission, and thank you very much for participating. The next member who has made it up to place 7 is Jazz. And you might say like, why the f did he model a spaceship? But actually I do really like the diversity that were used inside of this event, and modeling such a futuristic looking concept car was never made before, so it is definitely a great submission. Coming on place 6 we have the submission from Zigapog, my community helper, and he has made this modern looking Mustang. Normally Zigapog makes like 20 cars for one event, but for this one he only made this one detailed Mustang, which came out looking really good. Place number 5 is held by my big ass, so you can just go ahead and skip this. And coming on number 4 we have the submission from Vic, and he took the saying shoot for the moon and maybe you end up among the stars a little bit too serious. And actually I don't have too much to say about his models, as they're really perfect. This guy is just a pro at making these cars, and the fact that the cars have very less than 10,000 vertices sees is just insane. Place number 3 was taken by Alejandro Roses, and for his submission we have a completely new scenery again, and the renders with the black car and the sunset setting are just looking really realistic, so it is definitely worth being on place number 3. Coming on place number 2 we have another community help of mine called Extra Nexus, and his submission is not only about the car but the complete scenery. His submission looks like a car magazine that you had as a kid, so I actually have to say that this is one of the best submissions that I have ever received. And the winner of the Brand Spotlight Ford event is Dragons, who has made this realistic looking Ford GT, and I think that we can all agree that this model is looking perfect. And for all of you that have modeled a car before, I think you all know how hard it is to model such a hypercar with all of the air vents, so it is definitely worth being on place number 1. If you're now interested in the complete process of how to create a low poly or a high poly car in Blender, from setting up their blueprints, modeling the first car body parts and then finishing off with all of the details, you can go ahead and check out the first links inside of my description. Don't forget to join our Discord server so that you do not miss any new upcoming events. And now my kings and queens, I wish you all the best for the future, and we will see us in the next video.